Hello, how's it going? So, October is coming to a close, the spooky season is coming to an end, and I have celebrated my time in my most favorite month of the year, not just because it's spooky season, but because of my birthday, watching Hooptober. Hooptober is basically a rulebook of how to ruin your life. No. Hooptober has been going now for 10 solid years. In this case, it's Hooptober X. And it's basically where a bunch of film fans and nerds on Letterboxd are like, hey, let's watch 31 different horror films with this kind of criteria of what to do and what not to do. And just kind of go from there. In this case, I watched 31 films. I started in mid-September, like a bunch of people did, because when I discovered that people were doing it, it was basically... when I discovered people doing it, it's not drugs. It was about the 17th, or... it can't have been the 17th, wasn't it? It was the 16th of September. Which is a little disappointing for me, because it's like, I would have preferred to have started it in October, like some people did do. A lot of people started in mid-September, because the guy who basically runs it every year, or at least creates the list of what you should do, decided to start it early because he apparently had plans for the latter half of October, which is fine. In terms of doing daily movies, did I watch 31-day consecutive releases? No, I didn't. I skipped maybe 2 or 3 days. Some of them I would repercuss by the next day I would do 2 features. Like one Friday I was too busy to watch a film, so the next day I watched 2 Hooptobers. And I was fine with that, you know, but then there are some days where I had watched a 7.5 hour long Hungarian film in the cinema and decided I don't want to watch another movie for the next 24 hours, so I didn't, and then I watched my Hooptober the next day, the next night, I should say. So there were some days like that where I either deliberately skipped the day because I was socializing, I had other things on, I didn't have the time because I'm still going to work, and then coming home trying to watch a movie, and then trying to do whatever else, whether it be YouTube or household chores or hang out with friends or whatever it may be. So I did a bit of up and downs, but for the most part I think it took me 33 to 34 days, because I finished this 2 days ago. Did I finish it yesterday? I finished it yesterday on the 18th of October, which is basically a month and 2 days later. In this case it's 33 days later, which is fine. So I only really skipped 2 days. But did I make up for it? I think so. I have had a lot of fun with this. My main props for it was that I wanted to have every single movie be a physical release that I've owned. I think there was only 3 exceptions. One was a theatrical film that I watched, not an original theatrical release, but like an 80s film. It was Beyond the Door, and that was just because the Cinemaniacs had it. I'm like, I'll watch that, and I'm busy for the rest of the day. I'll just make it my Hooptober. Why not? I can do that. I watched Prevenge, which was a friend's Blu-ray copy, so not mine, but still physical format, and Billy the Kid vs. Dracula, which is on YouTube. That one's really bad. But yeah, so for my first time participating, there were obviously the rules. There are also bonus things, which is watch Zodiac Killer and 10 Rillington Place. Like last year there was a third film, Shaky Shivers. I haven't bothered with any of those. I just stuck with the films that I was available to get and I wanted to actually watch. So the quick rules: there must be 31 films from 6 countries, 8 decades. There's 2 post-apocalyptic and or natural disaster-related films. One with Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger. One with something is underground type of film. The 3 devil/Satan-centered films. 1 Amicus film. Amicus is a film company. I didn't go to the horror film of theirs because I didn't actually get a horror film until after I watched my film from theirs, but I did watch... if you're scared of Daleks as a kid, it's technically horror. It was a sci-fi one, but still, it's fine. One of these I watched was a comedy. I didn't realize it until I was like halfway, and I'm like, this movie's funny. What the hell? It's meant to be a thriller. What the crap? So, some backwards happened, but that's okay. The worst Dracula film by Letterboxd rating that you haven't seen and can access. 1 LGBTQ plus connected film. 5 films from De Palma, Wes Craven, Ken Russell, Hitchcock, and or Moorhead and Benson. I actually did watch a Moorhead and Benson, but I did 2 De Palmas, 2 Wes Cravens, and 1 Hitchcock. I don't think I have any Ken Russells. The only one I've seen of his been the Lair of the White Worm, which I watched on my birthday last year, which was very funny. But that was on like the Criterion channel or whatever, so I didn't have access to it this time because I don't think it's on the channel right now. Either way, the Moorhead and Benson one I had watched as a Blu-ray after the fact that I'd already done these because it's just what it was. I didn't want to do 5 individual films, but it was like end or this person. It's just 5 films from these people. I could have just done 5 Hitchcocks or 5. I was going to do 3 De Palmas. You know, I wasn't even going to do Hitchcock, and then I'm like, oh, but he has films from the 50s and 40s. I should do that, and then I did. So, yeah. Anyway, 2 Peter Cushing films. One of them was the Amicus film. I was going to go with 2 Frankensteins. I went with 1 Frankenstein and 1 Amicus. Why not? 1 based on the work of or invoking the name Bram Stoker. 1 film based on a Clive Barker story. 1 film that was released the year that you turned 10. Haha, that was my first choice. The 1 Mario Bava film, 1 film with an X in the title, and of course 1 Toby Hooper film. There must always be a Toby Hooper. So I will give you my list now. Of course, you can check out my Letterboxd down below to get my full in-depth reviews on each and every one of these films, because I went really into writing my reviews. I didn't just want to be like, yay, look, Hooptober, oh, this was spooky. I didn't just do goofy reviews like a lot of people do. I do that occasionally, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to actually be really critical analysis of this movie and my reception to it. Some of these movies were bad. Some of these were tremendous. Some of these were terrifying. It was a great mixture. So, from 1st to 31st, we had Martyrs from 2008 by Pascal Lagoya. My God, I do not want to pronounce these surnames. I gave it 4 stars. I guess I can just do them all now, can't I? Yeah. Alright, number 1, it's Martyrs. I hated it. But I loved it, I hated it. I'm torn. It's a good film. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I liked it until the torture porn really started to happen, because holy shit! I don't like that stuff. Torture porn's my least favorite horror genre. I really wanted to kind of dive into a lot of them in this one, and some of these were awful to watch. Some of these were fantastic, so it's like, oh my god. Turns out there isn't in between. It's not just bad, it's actually a spectrum. But yeah, Martyrs was really interesting. I would recommend it. Not to the faint of heart, but also the ending was really depressing. I don't know if you'd want to watch it just for that alone. Like, the torture is one thing, but it's like Hellraiser if it was serious. Yeah, it's a film. It was a struggle. But yeah, it was worth watching though, I think. As a film, it's worth watching. Yeah. I watched the Umbrella release. It was good. Good Blu-ray. My second release was As Above, So Below by John Eric Dowdle. I gave this 3.5 stars. I'm not going to specifically mention which ones were what years and whatever, because they all have different things. Like Martyrs, for example, if I check out my review, I had it as my first of 31, Decade 1 of 8 being the 2000s, Country 1 of 6 being France, and film release when I was 10. I did a lot of those checklists in one go, because I realized if you do the math, it's like 35 films in total. If you do everything individual, like the 6 countries, 8 decades, film when you were like, if you did every single one of them, it would be like 30 to 40 films. It would be more than 31. So I'm like, I gotta cross these, you know. Either way, that didn't bother me too much. I was like, do I want to be specific? Do I want to be like, nope, this is just for that listing, and this is just for that listing? But no, I decided, screw it, I'm gonna do it all in one go, you know. Because at least then, if I get to the second half of my Hooptober, when I don't really have much to check off, then I have more freedom to change it if I need to. And boy, did I change a couple of these. Again, I was meant to do another Hitchcock, a different Frankenstein film. My last 3 films completely changed. I just had a few Wes Cravens down. I completely removed them and changed them with different films. It was very interesting. My third film was Nightbreed, the Clive Barker one. This I gave 3 stars. I watched the director's cut, courtesy of the Arrow Blu-ray. I thought it was okay. It had too much going into it and not enough coming out of it. One of my friends actually reviewed it saying it's basically like Clive couldn't figure out if he wanted to do a slasher film or a mystical monster movie. He should have done one or the other, but he went with both. Cronenberg being in it is great. He's the best part of the slasher element. But then the monsters are great. They're the best part of, like, the creature element. The characters, on the other hand, the protagonist and his girlfriend, they suck. So, yeah. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. But yeah. Then I watched Cemetery of Terror by Ruben Galindo Jr. This is otherwise known as Cementerio del Terror. I got the synapse in. I was like, well, I gotta watch it, and I can add it to my list. Bada boom. It was good. I gave it 3 stars. Like, but a better 3 stars. Like, it's not a great film. Again, it's just a slasher. With also zombies in it. But it's like, I still really enjoyed it, but it took too long to get going. By the time the 45-minute mark had happened, I was bored. But then the last 45 minutes were great. So the first half, I'd give, like, very little in terms of a review. I'd probably give it, like, 1.5 stars. I'm like, this is boring. I don't care about any of this shit. But then the second half happens. You're like, oh my god, this is the most fun I've ever had in the movie. Maybe 3.5 stars, but I gave it 3 stars. I was very strict on that. I don't know why. Brotherhood of Satan was my next option, which was my first of the Satan films. This was not great. This was 2.5 stars for me. I have the imprint release. This is done by Bernard McKeevety. Okay. I thought this was pretty weak. It was really slow, really 70s. Again, it's early 70s. It's like a poor man's Rosemary's Baby in terms of, like, the idea, not the person being pregnant and then it being the devil, but the pacing and everything felt like this, the style of how the narrative developed felt like Rosemary's Baby, but just, like, poorly directed, and it kind of sucked. There wasn't much interesting stuff going into it. The opening scene's really interesting, but the rest of it's really boring. The closing scene is okay, but it's like, by the time you get to it, you're like, I already predicted where this was going about halfway into the movie, and I'm like, I don't really care. It's not that great. My next one was the Mario Bava film, was Blood and Black Lace, because, holy shit, I gave it 4.5 stars. I hadn't seen this before, thank God. It was magical. I've only started watching Bava's films as of this year. This is easily my favorite of his so far. I just adore that. It's the precursor for the Giallo, both in terms of the color, the slasher, the murder mystery. It's all there. It's more perfectly realized in this film than his previous. I know that. There's a lot of history to it. I watched a lot of the documentary behind the scenes stuff. It was really fun to watch. I had the Arrow Blu-ray release. It's incredible. I imagine the 4K UHD would look a lot better. I don't have that release, and it just came out the week I watched the Blu-ray I had, but it was wonderful. I really, really loved it. It was an absolute blast to watch. It's got great style, great music, great colors. Everything about it is fantastic. It's really creepy. It's good. It's just good stuff. Then I did my Tobe Hooper film, which I watched, The Funhouse, which I gave 3.5 stars. The Funhouse is a really weird film. It's like with most Hooper films, they can be very jarring at times. The first half is meant to be the whole fun, but also kind of creepy atmosphere of a carnival. And that's fine, but I was really kind of being like, when's anything going to happen? And that was, for me, the weakest part of it. But then it does start happening halfway in when the main characters get trapped in the funhouse, and it's like, oh, this is fun. And I really liked the last half. It was really fun. It was really cool. The lighting was great. This is the new 4K release. It looked fantastic. It was good. Again, the first half was lacking, but again, if I rewatch it, I imagine I'll like it more because I'll be like, good, I can like live in this world these characters are going to be in. I can be terrified for them because of what's about to come, about to happen. And yeah, so it's pretty fun. It was one of the only Tobe Hooper films I hadn't seen by this stage, so I think I've seen every film of his that I own, so yeah. Next up, we had my first Brian De Palma for the list, which was Dressed to Kill. So this is when I had jumped a day, because in between this I watched the 7.5 hour goddamn Hungarian film. But Dressed to Kill, for me, is a masterpiece. I gave it 5 stars. It looks incredible. This is a 4K from Arrow video, but I've heard the Zucchino or whatever, the Whoever did the 4K UHD, I've heard it's still really, really good, but it's like, there's not too much difference. Either way, I loved it. I loved the style. I loved how bloody erotic it was. It was wonderful. Like, it didn't even start as a horror film for like the first 20 minutes. It's not a horror film. And then it is, and then it's even more of a horror film. And it's like, oh my god. But it's just a great De Palma thriller. It looks fantastic. Nancy Allen is tremendous. The next one I followed up was my friend's suggestion, Caitlin Collar, who I've done an interview with. She's a director. She lent me her Blu-ray for Prevenge. I gave it 4 stars. I loved it. I understand that a lot of people do not care much for this movie. I don't think they understand what the hell they're watching. It's a bloody horror comedy set in Cardiff, you know, the comedy being the fact that they're just British. There's no punchlines or jokes. It's just a goofy idea. A woman who's bent on revenge is pregnant, like 7-8 months pregnant, and her baby is telling her through the womb to kill the people who are responsible for the father's death. It's very fun. So yeah. And the girl's from Alice Lowe, who wrote and directed and starred in it. She was pregnant at the time. She was in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, and she's fantastic in that. And that's when I realised she was her. I was like, oh yeah, I'm vibing with this more now. So yeah. Next up we have The Hills Have Eyes, my first of the Wes Craven bunch, which I very much thank God I watched this one first, because I realised I watched... Well, the next one I watched was... it actually wasn't. 2 days later I watched his earlier film, and I was like, oh, maybe I should have watched that first, because it's released earlier, but thank God I didn't, because this one was fun. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's not as, I don't know, that kind of really terrifying people in the mountains scary. Like, the idea of it doesn't scare me that much, but I liked its style. I liked the characters. I actually really believed that the characters were family, like the way they talked to each other and behaved. One of them clearly is gay and just does not want to tell anyone. There's a lot of stuff that I find to be interesting. The family that live in the mountains are really interesting. It's got a great dichotomy between the two, and that's the strongest element of the film. The fact that it's like, oh, hey, these guys are monsters, but these guys have to behave like monsters to be able to survive. It's like, commentary. It's good. I liked it. It's stylistic, it's gritty, it's dirty, it's 90 minutes. It's crazy stuff. Don't watch part 2. Apparently it's terrible. But yeah, I'd suggest it. It's definitely a classic, and his first really good film. Which isn't saying a lot, because his film that came out prior to it is his only other film. So, yeah. Anyway, next up I watched Land of the Dead. This is the apocalypse one I wanted to watch, and the Blu-ray had come in, so I was like, I guess I'm watching Land of the Dead today. It wasn't... I was planning to watch it later on the list, because I didn't know when it was meant to come in the mail. So, either way, I was happy about that. I've obviously done my Calm and Relax talk about it, which should have been out by this stage, but yeah. I liked the film a lot. I gave it 4 stars. I don't want to talk too much about it, because I dive into it a lot in that video, the Calm and Relax talk, where I look at Romero's Dead films. But yeah, it's a film that could have been a lot better than it was, because it's got a lot of ideas and characters and stuff that aren't fleshed out properly within its 90-minute runtime. But I love the zombies. I like the style, the effects. Some of the characters are really nice. I just enjoyed it the whole time. Like, I had a blast. It's just a fun watch. Zombies are great. Romero just has a lot of fun with making these zombie films, or at least with how he decides to characterize the zombies, and I really like that about them. Then I watched Last House on the Left. This was terrible. I gave it 2.5 stars. It's weird, because it's as a film, like, if you're going to look at it like from an objective point of view, from a historical point of view, it is something that really is of its time. It's such a controversial thing, but it's in such a dramatic period for American history, especially in the early 70s. It's the history of it being made and the context of when it was released is a lot more interesting than the film itself. The film is brutal. It's basically my least favorite type of torture porn. I would consider it in that degree. It's rough. It is gross. It has some really uncomfortable scenes. Not just like, oh, this is tense, but like genuinely, I did not want to keep watching it. I watched the Arrow Video Steelbook release I have of it, which is a great steelbook. It's a good release. The documentary and stuff talking about it is really interesting. I despise the film. I did buy the remake, ironically on 4K. I'm yet to watch it, but apparently it's like the same thing, just with a different director and modern effects, I guess, which, I don't know, we'll see what it's like, because this film is way too choppy and changey. If it was like hardcore the whole time, it would have been at least interesting, but it kept having all these comedic parts of the cops come in, and they'd have like banjos playing in the background and shit. Like the score was all over the place and it was messy and terrible, but as it was, there's the scenes of the gratuitous stuff about halfway in, just before the 40-minute mark, what happens to the two girls is awful to watch. I don't usually get triggered by that kind of stuff in movies. I mean, obviously it's upsetting, but I've never really been so upset by it before. Maybe Martyrs was just a good precursor to how up Last House on the Left was. A stupid name for a movie. They don't go to any house. There's no house on the left. It's just what they came up with. Got more butts than seats kind of deal. But yeah, it has a really good moment just after the second girl has had her assault, basically. It's a really, really well done part of the film that's just like kind of all the characters feel really grossed out by what they've done in a way, which is weird because they've just done it to someone else and more brutally, but this time it just feels different. I think because you are more relating to the main character because you've seen her the whole time. And it's a really tragic scene. I really like what was done with it. But again, the rest of the film is just revenge. And I didn't find as much pleasure in the revenge as I should have, probably, but it's just really upsetting to watch and to think about. I wouldn't suggest it, but if you're a purist for Craven, sure. If you like this kind of cinema, go for it, but if you're a regular horror goer, it's not the slasher stuff that he's known for. It's got the brutality of Hills Have Eyes, but that has a more inhumaneness because they're weirdos that live in the hills. This is people who are regular folk, and what they do is really messed up. Much more messed up than obviously what happens in Hills Have Eyes, which came out after. So yeah, I'd start with Hills Have Eyes. Don't watch Last House on the Left. But then I cleansed my plate. Oof. And this was the day I did a double feature for my... because I was busy on the Friday. I watched Nosferatu the Vampire, the Werner Herzog version. I gave it 5 stars. I love the 22 version. I love the Bram Stoker's Dracula, the other 70s... Was it 80s film? I think that was the 80s film. Francis Ford Coppola one. The original Dracula is a classic. This is obviously based on the Nosferatu movie. But still, like, basically just a color adaptation with dialogue and stuff. And I really liked the original, and I really loved this. I loved its style. It's slow. It's just gradual. It's beautiful. It's a short movie. It's only 107 minutes, but it feels really, really long. But then it also, like, you get to, like, almost an hour in, and you're like... Actually, I basically got to an hour in, and I'm like... They're not even back at the main place yet. They're still at Dracula's castle. What's happening here? So... It was interesting. I really liked it. I think it was stylistically really nice. I watched the German version, despite there still being dubs in it. As in, there is the English dub, but people in the film were still dubbed. Yeah, I think it's really good, and I would suggest it. I then followed that up with 2005's House of Wax by Jamie, it's got a U in it, Jaume, Colette Serra. This was really fun. I gave it 4 stars. It's not a remake of the original. I learnt after the fact that it's a remake of, like, Tourist Trap. But it's got a House of Wax, and they've got a lot of wax figures, and the reason that the characters become wax is really cool. It's a great slasher film. It's got some beautiful effects. Paris Hilton is really fun in it. There's a lot of crazy stuff in it that I honestly think is wonderful. I watched the Scream Factory release. I did an Anatomy of a Blu-ray afterwards because the interviews are really interesting. It's a good film. I would suggest it. It's a really fun watch. It's a bit long because it's like 113 minutes. It could have been like 10 minutes shorter, but like everything's necessary. But it's like it just feels like there's so much there. I don't know. It just drags a little bit, but yeah, it's good. I really liked it. Probably could have skipped a bit of the start. I guess there's a lot of stuff that they probably didn't need. Anyway, I followed that up with Doctor Who and the Daleks. This isn't a horror film. Unless you count the Daleks to be scary, they're meant to be, but it's it's a 60s sci-fi. This was the Amicus film and my first Peter Cushing film. I have the Steelbook on 4K. It looks tremendous. It's fine. I gave it 2.5 stars. I know that's like as weak as Last House on the Left, but this one's just kind of dull. It looks fantastic because it's a 60s goddamn sci-fi, but again, still low budget, but still enough budget to look interesting. But it's just kind of dull. It's fine, you know. I'm like, the amount of times I was like, I'm tempted to just look at my phone and like not really pay attention, but I'm like, I gotta watch this. It's a struggle, but yeah, it's alright. I've heard the second one's a lot better, but I've also heard that it's like exactly the same, but just with more Daleks and on Earth or whatever. So I'm yet to watch that. Anyway, my next one was Saw. This was not originally in my list. I added it to the list because I'm like, I gotta watch these Saw films because guys watching the Saw films, the new Saw films out. Check out my Calm and Relaxed talk. I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was really good. It's not the best of the series, but it still is fantastic. It's, again, the kind of torture porn that I was expecting to not like, but it's actually just an escape room film. There's not really much, there's still torture, it's not really, it's not it's not over the top where you might enjoy it, again, in the pornographic sense, but I think it's still really great. It's really fun. It's clearly not the best. There are so many better films in this series. There are a couple of worse ones, but yeah, it's a good film. I hadn't seen it before. I've had the Blu-ray for ages, well, for a couple of months now. So I figured it's about time I watch them all, get them all done. It's a good Australian director and writer. It's good stuff. Then I did my second Peter Cushing film with Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. This is from my second site release, which. I realized actually whilst I was watching it that it is the last that they did for both Frankenstein and for Peter Cushing, for Frankenstein's character. I think it may have been one of his last, if not his last, Hammer horror film. And I think Terence Fisher as well, one of his last ones. It's not as well regarded, and again, you look at what came before it. I've seen the first Frankenstein one. I haven't seen any of the rest. The Evil of Frankenstein was on my list to watch for Hooptober, but I removed it. Maybe I should have watched that instead, I don't know, but I've got every other Hammer horror Frankenstein except for the one that Peter Cushing isn't in. So I have like Frankenstein Creative Woman. I've got so many that now I have to watch, and I'm keen to watch them, but yeah, I gave it 3.5 stars. I think it was fun. I like the cinematography, the monster design. It's one of those, what if we kind of change it up, instead of it being someone building a monster, or building a human that becomes a monster, but the real monster is Frankenstein bullshit. Instead, it's he's just in prison, but like a psychiatric prison, and it's like, oh, he's just been putting his favorite parts of people who are mentally disturbed together into one big creature, and it's really fun. It has some great effects, very cheesy and 70s Hammer horror. I'm still learning to appreciate Hammer horror as a brand, but I still like what they do, and I thought it was pretty fun. So then I watched Diary of the Dead, which I gave 3 stars. I won't dive too deep again, my Romero video I just did. But I thought it was fun. It was, yeah, I'm just going to say that. I thought it was fun. 3 stars. Yeah, it was an interesting use of its formatting and style, and an interesting Romero film. I know I've just added 2 Romero films into the list, but guess what, baby? There's 3. It's Survival of the Dead. Go check out my Romero video. I gave this one also 3 stars. I liked it more than Diary, but yeah, go check out that video. I basically just read out my reviews from Letterboxd because I wanted to be really in depth about my opinions on those films because they're controversial. So yeah. Anyway, I followed that up with Urban Legend by Jamie Blanks, who's also Australian, I believe. Yes, he is. He's done Valentine and Long Weekend remake. Yeah. This was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It's very much a Scream meets I Know What You Did Last Summer slasher film. It would have benefited a lot if they focused it in a different avenue. It goes for the teen slasher film, and each kill is based on an urban legend. Problem is, they don't emphasize what urban legend each one is, and some of them are set up, but a lot of them aren't paid off, or like even the ones that are set up, they're paid off, and you kind of have to like look at it and be like, oh, that's the one they mentioned earlier in the film. They don't specifically say, that's the one from earlier in the film. Like, look, oh my god, you know. But it's like, I feel like in my review I was like, this could have been a better X-Files episode where it's like, oh, it's a urban legend killer at this college campus, and again, person taking revenge, whatever, and they're using the forefront of the urban legends to kill people, which in fact in and of itself becomes an urban legend. It's fine. You know, I've got the 88 films release. I'm yet to watch the trilogy, but I thought it was fun. It's like 25 years old now. Hey, so am I. Almost. As of filming, almost. As of release, I am. Oh, trippy, isn't it? Anyway, then I watched Billy the Kid vs. Dracula. This film fucking sucked. It's 74 minutes. My god, there's a drag. I had to get my eyes adjusted to the film style because it looked so shitty on the TV. It was a print that was obviously old as hell on YouTube for free. It's 74 minutes. It's directed by William Bodine. Even he was like, he just batted out a bunch of shitty westerns at the end of his life and was like, I don't care, I just need the money, I'm going to go home. It's not great. Even the guy John Carradine, who played Dracula, forgot he was in the movie. I gave it 1.5 stars. It is awful. I mean, obviously it's very low rated in Letterboxd. That's the reason why I watched it. It is just bad. It's boring as a Dracula film. It's boring as a Billy the Kid film. None of it makes sense as to why they're up against each other. It gets to the point where Billy the Kid shoots Dracula and doesn't do anything. So Dracula grabs him and tries to strangle him, throws him against the wall. The sheriff comes in, shoots Dracula a bunch of times. It does literally nothing. He throws the gun at... No, Billy the Kid gets up, grabs the gun, throws it at Dracula, which makes him fall down, and then he stakes Dracula. That's the end of the movie. There. Billy the Kid won because he actually used a goddamn stake. Anyway, bad movie. Moving on. I watched Obsession, the Brian De Palma film. I won't spoil the twist. I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was very interesting. It's a bit slow. The twist wasn't as insane as I was expecting because I kind of guessed it. I'm like, hey, isn't that? And then it was, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, but again, visually it's great. Stylistically, it's pretty fun. It's a good, basically, rip-off of a Hitchcock film, a classic Hitchcock, but with a change that works very well for it and feels a lot more Brian De Palma. So yes, that was, again, 4 years before Dressed to Kill. So he was still moulding his craft, but boy, this man can make some movies. Talking about Hitchcock, I watched The Trouble with Harry. It's not a horror film, nor really a thriller. It has a thriller sequence in the last 15 minutes, but it's actually a comedy. It's like his only real comedy where it's like, oh, what if these people find a body and they just keep trying to bury it and then unburying it and whatever because they don't know who to blame and then what to do with it. It's very funny. It is not what I expected to watch. If I knew it was a comedy going in, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. If I knew it was a comedy going in, I would have watched Shadow of a Doubt instead, because that's at least a thriller. So, yeah, this is my failure on that part of not realizing. If I go to Letterboxd and look up genres, it says comedy, mystery, thriller. So, yeah, it's a hell of a stuff. But again, it still has a great thriller element to it later in the film, and it's a great section that basically has a setup that you expect to pay off, and then is completely backfires, and you're like, oh my god, Hitchcock, you cheeky bastard. It's fun. I'd suggest it. Go check it out. Then I watched Shivers from Cronenberg, because I have the Blu-ray, and I think this was meant to be another... It's technically an apocalypse one. It wasn't a part of any catalog. I just wanted to watch it. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's really messed up. It's like it's a zombie version kind of what if the zombies were they were zombified because of these parasites that made them really, really horny, but horny to the point where they will commit sexual assault. That's the uncomfortable element of the film. But then it just it's very 70s, so it's basically just like, oh, look at this controversial stuff, I mean, obviously sexual assault, but like, oh, look, gay people, oh, look, incest, there's a lot of funny, goofy shit like that, where it's like, it's kind of meant to be more of a joke in that regard, or at least later into the film it becomes more of a joke, but it's really interesting. I would suggest it. I Watched the Vestron Blu-ray. Pretty good print. Good special features as well. So, yeah, it was interesting. The effects are really gnarly. But yeah, it's again very 70s. But it's Cronenberg. It's like his first proper feature where he actually wrote a proper script with an actual score and everything and characters. None of his bloody university shit. So if you're going to start with Cronenberg, start here. It's a good place to start. So yeah, it's good stuff. I enjoyed it. Again, just 3.5 stars. If you don't like the sexual assault nature to it, you might not like it that much. I had to kind of jump over that hurdle because I'm like, look, after having seen Hills Have Eyes, it's like, no, not Hills Have Eyes. After seeing Last House on the Left, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to be watching this shit anymore. But it's like, it goes away quickly, so it just becomes a joke on itself on society at the time, and like, oh, this is taboo, now this is taboo, now this is taboo. A lot of that shit is not taboo now. I mean, incest is still taboo, and sexual assault is, but they're like the only crazy ones, realistically. I mean, murder is taboo, I guess. Is it taboo? It's pretty normal, I don't know. Not legally normal, but you know. Then I did a Dario Argento. I watched Opera. I hadn't seen this one before. I don't believe it was a part of any country that I hadn't already ticked off. No. But I gave it 4 stars. I watched that new 2K restoration, which was like, said it had like 160 hours put into it, or some dramatic number like that. It looks fantastic. The sound is very off, very strange audio design, probably just because of how they recorded it, not because of the edit. But the story's really fun. It has some great visuals, some great camera work, some great trickery. The villain is fun. It's all a good mixture of stuff. It's like, wow, I did not know that Argento still had it in him by the late 80s. But yeah, it's good. I mean, I have enjoyed all of his films until this point, so I've had no misses. I haven't seen the largest array of these post-90s releases, but in fact, I haven't seen any until... hold on a second, until a couple more later. In fact. But yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it a lot. I would definitely suggest it. I guess maybe don't look too deep into like plots and stuff. Just go watch it and have a blast because it's really fun and it looks great. Then I watched on Friday the 13th Freaky. I did actually watch a Friday the 13th with my partner because she hadn't seen it. Jason Takes Manhattan. But I hadn't seen Freaky, and I needed a 2020s film and an LGBTQIA plus film. And lo and behold, Freaky. I mentioned it to a friend of mine as it was my LGBT film, and he was like, really? I don't remember there being that. I'm like, oh, I think it's just side characters. But then there's like a whole part where Vince Vaughn and like this technically teenage kid kiss, which is comedic. But, you know, also, oh, 2 guys kissing. But yeah, the comedy is the fact that it's a guy he's like a 40-year-old man who's got the spirit of a 17-year-old girl in him. It's Freaky Friday, but a slasher film. But like Freaky Friday meets Friday the 13th, like literally. I thought the slasher element was really fun at the start. The first 10 minutes are fantastic and were genuinely tense. The comedic section was really good as well. I've never watched any of the other body swap Freaky Friday films, I don't think. I think there is one film I've seen, but I never saw the Lindsay Lohan one with Jamie Lee Curtis, so I had nothing to compare it to in that regard, but the structure of the narrative seemed pretty similar. But I enjoyed it for what it was, I thought it was fun. I gave it 3.5 stars. I liked its style. Christopher Landon, who directed it, has done a couple other slashes that I really like, including the, the Happy Death Day to You films. So I really like those films. He should make another. Apparently he's going to do a Scream film. That could be interesting. I have seen a couple of his Paranormal Activity films. I don't like them, but they exist. But I really liked Freaky. I thought it was really fun. Catherine Newton was great. Vince Vaughn was great. Great performances. Some great kills. Some great, really bloody kills. I'm like, oh my god, I didn't expect that. It's really fun. And on Friday the 13th was the perfect time to watch it. Then on the Saturday, I watched Beyond the Door. I will admit, I was watching other films in between these. Again, I was watching all the Saw films and a bunch of other shit. So it wasn't like, I could have easily banged this out within like 10 days. But instead, I'm like, committing to the bit. Every day is a different film, and if I skip a day, I have to make up for it. With again just two exceptions, and I didn't mind that because honestly, sometimes I have a life, I guess. But I watched Beyond the Door. It was I gave it 3 stars. It was directed by two people, Robert Barrett and Ovidio G. Asonitis. Great. This was like, it's again, Rosemary's Baby meets Exorcist. It's insane. It's not a great movie, but it's like really funny at times. Some of the effects are really good. The dialogue is hilarious. It's really funny. With a cinema, it was really fun to watch. I don't think I would have enjoyed this by myself. Some films just need other people with you to watch it because, oh my god, sometimes they're really slow and boring and I almost fell asleep. But then the funny parts are so funny that it's worth it. So it's like, if it wasn't, it's 109 minutes, it could have been shorter. If it was like maybe 100 minutes, it would have been a lot better, but yeah. Also, if it was just more interesting, it would have been a lot better. But then I watched Mother of Tears, or The Mother of Tears, which is Dario Argento's 2007 film. I haven't seen any of these films post-opera. I have Two Evil Eyes, and then that's it for my up to the 90s list for films of his, outside of like Four Flies and Grey Velvet. In terms of what I own, I haven't seen anything else post that. I figured, look, I might as well add this to the list, give me a reason to watch it. It's bad. It's a very generic story. It's like a bad Down Brown novel, but most of his are pretty bad. So yeah, like that Da Vinci Code shit and whatever. But it's got Asia Argento, and she's awful. She's so bad in this movie. The gore effects are really good, but there's a lot of gratuitous shit that doesn't need to be there. A lot of gratuitous nudity, which can be fine, I guess, for slasher films in the 90s if it's like someone getting murdered and like, oh, their shirt gets ripped off, or cliche kind of stuff. But in this case, Asia has a shower scene, and I'm like, isn't her dad directing this movie? He wrote it. He co-wrote it with like 3 other people. That's not great. And then you've got the element of there's a lesbian sex scene that's randomly intercut into the film, and then those people get brutally murdered. It's really tough. Being a fan of Suspiria and Inferno, this is really tough to watch because it's like, I'm watching it as a sequel to those. I'm not watching it as a standalone thing. When they mention all those previous films and what happened, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Now we're into the lore. And that's like a one-off scene with Udo Kier, then he dies, and then nothing else happens related to it. Every other point of exposition is just kept saying by this other people, because that's all the film is. It's just people. Asia goes to a place, they say, hey, you have to do this. Here are the witches. These are what they do. Witches come, they attack, she runs away. She goes to the next person, rinse and repeat, and rinse and repeat. It's really dumb. It's such a stupid ending. It's very much like Suspiria, but what if Suspiria was bad? Yeah, and not like the 2018 version. I love the 2018 one. So yeah, not a good film. Then I watched The Endless because I wanted to watch the Aaron Moorhead, Justin Benson film. I've had the Blu-ray for a year or so now. Our video release. Good release, great special features. Interesting film. I gave it 4 stars. I actually really liked it. It definitely feels like a lower budget film because it is, but it has a lot of fun with what it can do. It's very Cthulhu-ish, very H.P. Lovecraft. I love films that are like that explore this kind of idea of the weirdest, most insane stuff, but you can't really visualize it, and I kind of respect that. Like, they didn't try to, they did for like paintings and stuff, and I love that, the impressionism stuff. They did do with some digital effects, but for the most part it was just carnage and stuff. But yeah, it was great. It looked great, it sounded great, it had some good visual effects and some obviously dodgy ones later on, but it was fine, you know. But yeah, I really liked it. I'm really interested to see what else they've done, because they've done other films. I've seen their Moon Knight episodes, which were not good episodes. Not their fault, they didn't write the screenplays. But I haven't seen their other features, and I would like to watch their other features because I've heard very good things. So yeah, I can see why this is there on the list of with Craven and Hitchcock and Ken Russell and whatever, but it just feels a bit weird. It's like, why are they with them? Like, you know, you got De Palma and Hitchcock and Wes Craven. It's like they're legends. I mean, Ken Russell, arguably so. I haven't seen enough of his films to consider him so. I only know of the White Worm one and Whore, and I've only seen the White Worm one, and that one was really fun but goofy, but goofy in a good way. Goofy is my way of saying funny and fun that I enjoyed. Otherwise I would have said dumb and stupid. Stupid with two O's. But yeah, so... But the fact that these guys were in that list of 5 directors to watch, I'm like, interesting that they're in it. But yeah, I guess as a good way to promote these newer up-and-coming directors who have made some great stuff. And this one was really good, so I really liked it. And then we're getting to our last 2. We've got I Trap the Devil, which was my second of 3 devil films. I know that Beyond the Door wasn't a devil film because they never imply that she's possessed by Satan. Either way, I Trap the Devil is a 2019 film by Josh Lobo. I watched the Scream Factory release that I bought for $10 like 2 years ago at Minotaur because Lee was selling that at a low price because he was getting rid of all the Blu-rays. I can see why now because he's done Cinemaniacs and obviously doesn't need to do that anymore. But yeah, I watched it. I was really excited for it because the idea sounds great. Turns out it's really good if you watch the episode of The Twilight Zone. If you watch the movie, you'll be like, wow, this kind of sucks. It's really low budget. Despite it being 84 minutes, they don't do shit in the whole runtime. There's no discussion of the intricacy of this person down in this basement cellar cupboard is the devil. Is it not? It's just a back and forth. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Then they check it out. It's like, okay, for one person, they flip their opinions. The guy says it is, from what his brother said. The girl says it isn't because it's ridiculous. They go down there. The girl's like, yep, it is. The guy says, no, it isn't. And then that's the movie. Because then he goes to open it and he gets killed. And they all die. It's got a terrible ending. It's just a poorly executed version of a really good idea. Because there's no communication with it. It's just flat, and it looks like a Stranger Things episode because of all the Christmas lights and the digital photography and all the neon lighting. It's not great. I wouldn't suggest it at all. I don't think it was really worth watching in any regard. I know some people do like it a lot. One of the producers is someone I follow on Twitter, so I was really excited to watch it because of that. But sure, I guess you can throw your money in trash and maybe it'll grow into something good. But in this case, it just did not. So there you go. Not a good film. However, I did top it off with my last Devil Satan's featured film, The Devil's Candy. The Devil's Candy by Sean Byrne, who is an Australian director. I gave the film 4 stars. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. I liked the metal. I liked the music. I'm not much of a metalhead personally, but I can appreciate music in general. I'm very all-rounder when it comes to music. And it was just, I liked the visual style, I liked the narrative. It did not go where I expected it to. It's basically I'd say Going Blind, but yeah, Going Blind. Its narrative is set up in a way that you have your opening thing, and then the family get to a location you expect, oh, the same thing's going to happen to that person, like with most possession-inspired slasher films, whatever. But then it just goes in a completely different direction, and it gets really tense. There's a brilliant scene, pretty decent of its length in a bathroom. It's like pulse pounding. Like, I was happy that no one was home because I was just like I could be like grabbing onto my armchair, but there's no arms on my chair because it's an ottoman. So I was just like, it's really stressful, but it was so well done. The ending was great. Some of the effects were a little bit dodgy, but again, low budget film. I kind of expected, especially for fire effects. But yeah, it's really fun and really interesting. I would suggest it. But as an overall, I think this was a really interesting experiment in terms of doing a Hooptober. I follow a couple of people who are doing Hooptober at the same time. Some who had started at the start of October. Some people were just doing 13 days of horror because Friday the 13th was happening. Let's just do 13 straight days of horror. Someone I follow, Oscar, who actually lives in Adelaide, did it at the same time as me. He started doing it. I'm like, I should do it too. And the same day that he was doing it, I realized I was free at home for 5 hours. I watched Martyrs. So I'm like, nothing's going to stop me now. I need to watch all these movies because I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm not going to put myself through Martyrs if I'm not doing it for a reason. So, as an overall, this was a really fun experiment. I'm keen to do it next year, but It's just the struggle of having to do 31 films in 31 days. I don't mind if I miss a day to make a double up on another day, so I can still do 31 days. If not, just skip a day and then do the next day and just basically add an extra day to my list, even if I'm not adding extra movies. I don't mind that as well. It's fun to have them as films that I own, that I haven't seen especially. That was the main reason I wanted to do it. 31 films that it was 29 films I own, 31 films I hadn't seen. So for that reason alone, it was really fun. The fact that I could have done Saw X instead of House of Wax, sure, would have been the obvious choice, but I was like, look, I'm doing House of Wax because I want to watch House of Wax. I'm going to watch Saw X anyway because it's in cinemas and it was $10 to watch it. I'm going to do that anyway, but yeah. It was fun. It was really fun to do this. It was still challenging. Some of the films were a challenge to watch. Some of them were boring. Some of them were really tough with their subject matter. But yeah, it's interesting to see different styles of horror. Even the ones that still have mostly comedy or ones that you could see as mostly comedic because of their stylings. So yeah, as an overall, I'd suggest it for next year if you're a horror person. Even if you're not, you can find 31 films that may choose your fancy, may not, and just go with that and see what happens. Like, if you, in the mix of it, are like, I didn't like this style of genre, like, again, maybe it's a torture porn, maybe you don't like slasher films, and you're like, I watch Scream, and then I watch, like, Friday the 13th and realize, I don't really like slasher films that much, I'm going to cut them from my list and replace them with other things. Go for it. It's your list, nothing's set in cement. As long as you apply by the basic rules of you gotta have all of these features, then do that. When I removed some of my Hitchcocks, I was like, oh, I gotta make sure I have one of them in because I need a Hitchcock in my listing, even though I did do a Benton Moorhead later. But I also wanted to have one for the time period because I think I did the 50s and his was the only film I think I did in the 50s. But it didn't matter too much because I did 9 different decades because I added the 2020s because of Freaky. So that worked out, So yeah, it was really interesting to watch how quickly within an hour I was able to get down all the films, like the majority of the films I did. I did the whole list in an hour, did Martyrs immediately. It wasn't until like the week after I started changing some films around and adding some ones. So yeah, I'm happier that I didn't do 2 more Wes Craven films and instead do I Trap the Devil and Devil's Candy. I know I Trap the Devil wasn't great, but at least I've watched it. But I did like watching Devil's Candy, so that gave me reason to watch them. So yeah, it's just good stuff. I would recommend a lot of these films. Again, go down to the description, check out my Letterboxd, my Hooptobers as one of my playlists, so you can go into my full in-depth reviews. But yeah, so as an overall, this was a really fun experiment. We'll see if I can do it again next year. I don't know, Hooptober 11, I might as well, but it's in a year's time. We'll see where I'm at. Cool. Thanks for watching. Happy Halloween. See you next time. Bada bing.